It is a big idea, a new world order.
Your world is not what it seems. Alex Ansary, Outside the Box.
Transmitting vital information and breaking news without the corporate spin. I'm Alex Ansary, and this is Outside the Box TV, coming to you live April 17th, the 11th year of the 21st century. Tonight on Outside the Box TV, I welcome back to the program Leon Nagant from San Francisco, California, a clairvoyant that appeared on this show several times in 2008, with some commentary on some things transpiring in our world at that time, tensions between the United States and China. Leon Nagant has an interesting take on what's going on. You'll find out why later on the broadcast. His website is leonnagant.com. But on that note, before we get to him in about 10 minutes' time, we are going to begin the weekly Outside the Box summary in focus of the headlines that you all need to be aware of. And of course, this is going to dovetail quite nicely with the guest coming up in 10 minutes' time. Israel is preparing for war on all fronts. The Iron Dome has been completed with U.S. tax dollars, and this is already in operation. There's a lot of news involving China. We're going to summarize those for you tonight before we get to the updates on Japan. Galveston Port is now positioned to outsource its operations to the Communist Chinese. The Port of Galveston is in its final negotiations to lease its facilities to a major investment group, which could make it the first U.S. port to turn over its entire operation to the private sector. The Port of Galveston operations are negotiating with the Carlyle Group and Hong Kong-based company Hutchison Port Holdings, which is a subsidiary of Hutchison Whampoa, owned by Li Ka-shing. This is owned by the Chinese billionaire who is part of the Chinese military. If negotiations go well, and this is mainstream news right now, although you may not be aware of it, this international conglomerate will have a 75-year lease to operate inside the Port of Galveston in Texas in the nation of the United States. In the next headline, the following report was released several months ago. This is a flashback. China's oil company buys South Texas oil fields for about $2.16 billion, a one-third interest in 600,000 acres that Chesapeake Energy leases. And in the next report, which comes from the Washington Times, China blocks coastal waters and enlarges military. China's troubling military buildup coincides with new efforts by Beijing to block the Navy from international waters near its coasts and field new missiles, submarines, and cyber weapons. According to the commander of U.S. forces, Chinese weapons that pose concern include a growing arsenal of ballistic and cruise missiles, including anti-ship missiles and advanced radar-evading stealth combat aircraft. For years on this show, I've also talked about how the United States has given China this technology. Now from MSNBC, water wars, ? Thirsty energy short China stirs fear across the planet. And it goes on further into this. Phrase I want to remind you of, trust but verify. All these headlines you can find online to read them in full. West versus China. A new Cold War begins on Libyan soil. This is some commentary that was posted on Global Research. And the author is Patrick Henningsen. Bill in the next graphic. One only has to read the strategic briefings in U.S. AFRICOM documents to realize the true endgame in Libya. And go back, Bill, and keep it on the NATO shot, because this is directly pertaining to why NATO is involved in North Africa. And it pertains to the control of valuable resources and the eviction of China from North Africa. When the U.S. formed AFRICOM in 2007, some 49 countries signed on to the U.S. military charter for Africa, but one country refused. Do you know what country that is? Libya, apparently. Such a treacherous act by Libya's leader, Gaddafi, would only sow the seeds for a future conflict down the road in 2011. And as we reported on the show several weeks ago, according to Beijing's Ministry of Commerce, China's current contracts in Libya number no less than 50 large projects involving contracts in excess of $18 billion. What is even more revealing here is that due to the recent instability in Libya, we have seen these investments take a serious hit and their business is down. Their operations are down 53%. So this will surely affect China's economy to a certain degree and perhaps could bring about some form of retaliation. I mentioned several months ago about a film that Warner Brothers, I believe, was working on by the name of Red Dawn, a remake of the 1984 Red Dawn film. But instead of the Russians invading the United States, China appears to be invading the United States in this Hollywood film that initially was supposed to be released in November of 2010. What you're looking at here is a shot of UN peacekeepers. It's also been announced that China is going to play a greater role in peacekeeping operations, specifically in Africa, perhaps, though, as the world becomes less stable elsewhere as time goes on. So it's pretty bizarre to see these things happening, to hear what Leon Lagon is talking about, as you'll hear later on, and see an attempt to make a Hollywood film about this. But now things have taken an even odder turn. It's come out, Bill, bring up the report. Real China. Hollywood tries to stay on China's good side. This is from the LA Times. Without Beijing even uttering a critical word, MGM is changing the villains in its Red Dawn remake from the Chinese to the North Koreans. The change illustrates just how much sway China's government has in the global entertainment industry. And the next slides here, these are shots from the movie set that has been filming until recently in Detroit, Michigan. But the plot takes place in the Pacific Northwest, Spokane specifically. In the last few weeks, MGM has been showing Red Dawn to potential buyers at other studios, several people who have seen the movie but requested anonymity because they were not authorized to speak on the record and said they couldn't risk distributing it given the potential blowback in China. Now, having said that, before we get to Leon, let's go over some of the earth changes from just the last week, also some updates pertaining to China. Hundreds of aftershocks worsen Japan's quake trauma and fray nerves in the 5 weeks since Japan's massive earthquake and tsunami, forcing survivors to relive the terror almost daily. The incessant rumbling of the Earth's stressed crust has held back relief work. Many now complain of earthquake sickness, the sensation that the ground is swaying beneath their feet even when it is not, a condition blamed on confused inner ear balance receptors and a heightened state of anxiety. Now, the melting of Japan's plant fuel rods has now been confirmed. They are not able to contain the melting of the rods. It is spilling into the sea, and there is massive suppression in our country and others as to how harmful this level of radiation that's being found, traces of it all over the planet, how it can impact human health. In the next headline, exposure levels are going up everywhere. The decision to raise the alert level to 7, they're saying it's now at least at the level of Chernobyl. Perhaps worse, because Chernobyl was 10 days. This clearly has been going on for 4 to 5 weeks. But it admits to, it's an admission that the accident is likely to have substantial and long-lasting consequences for health and the environment. All the more reason to think good thoughts about your health and to take care of yourself. Radiation is continuing to leak out of the reactors, according to Dr. Miko Kaku. The situation is not stable at this time. Radiation continues to leak out of control. We are looking at a ticking time bomb, but it appears stable, but the slightest disturbance, a secondary earthquake, a pipe break, evacuation of the crew at Fukushima could set off a full-scale meltdown at 3, perhaps 4 or 5 nuclear power stations, far beyond what we saw at Chernobyl. The situation in Japan has led some analysts to believe that this could go atomic. The next headline, Japan nuclear plant's owner says crisis won't be resolved for 6 to 9 months. And there's lots of debates between the superpowers how to deal with it. The French are suggesting simply putting concrete on it, but that wouldn't get rid of a problem, the problem. It would simply bury it. And so now we segue to some of the other headlines that are running concurrent, and the picture becomes even more crystal clear. Pacific salmon may be dying from leukemia-type virus. For 60 years before the early 1990s, an average of nearly 8 million wild salmon returned from the Pacific Ocean to the Fraser River each year to spawn. Now the salmon industry is in a state of collapse, with mortality rates ranging from 40% to 95%. So with the situation in Japan, residents there going through aftershocks, rumbling underground. It's not just Japan. There's more reports emerging, as well as earthquake swarms around the Madrid fault. FEMA's doing a lot of drills there also at this time. They bought millions of MREs. There's a bunch of rumblings taking place across North America, not only in the United States, but also in Canada. This story comes out of Ontario. Ontario's Environment Ministry is investigating reports of mysterious rumblings in parts of Windsor and Essex County. Sonia Skillings, a resident mother, says, "I feel like I'm going mental. It's in the ground and it feels like there is a subway under the house. It happens at all different times, in the middle of the night as well. We just want to know what the noise is, and authorities have no answer or response to what is causing the rumbling." In Portland, Oregon, several days ago, in fact, late Thursday night moving into Friday morning, Portland was hit with 4 small earthquakes. The first quake at 8:49 p.m. Thursday was listed as a magnitude 2.1, and its epicenter was a mile of south-southwest of Portland City Center. Another quake at 9:26 was listed as a magnitude 1.7, and its epicenter was less than a mile from the city center. And we had another one 30 minutes later that was a 1.2, about a mile from the city center. And there was another one after that. There was also some reports about one near Woodburn as well. Supercomputers eyeing to predict natural disasters is what we're seeing in the next one. And we also see this one. Portland, Seattle face quake like Christchurch. And this is actually a report that came out in February before the Japanese earthquake. City of Portland sits right on top of the Portland Hills Fault, which may or may not still be active and faces significant concerns in many areas. Seattle faces similar risks from the Seattle Fault, which is active, and whether or not an earthquake has happened lately offers little reassurance. The New Zealand fault that just crippled Christchurch hasn't moved in about a millennia. Now, Yellowstone. You can see we're summarizing a lot of headlines tonight that are popping up across the planet. Yellowstone plume, 400 miles long, larger than thought. Now, when I say the term plume, or when they use the term plume, we're not talking about a plume of smoke, but a plume that's estimating how many miles across these earthquakes are taking place, these swarms of earthquakes in Yellowstone. And so this is an update from the 2009 study, which estimated that the plume was 250 miles larger. It's also the new study estimated that the earthquakes are even deeper and deeper in the ground. This is something that came out in the BBC in the next headline. U.S. storms and tornadoes, death toll rising. And it has risen to 43. This is breaking news from the BBC. The latest state to be hit was North Carolina, where 62 tornadoes left a trail of destruction in the worst storm to hit the state in 2 decades. The governor declared a state of emergency after deaths were reported in 4 counties. We're also seeing other states hit: Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Virginia. Also, hailstones the size of grapefruit were reported as the storm swept through the region, creating flash floods as well as tornadoes. Also from the BBC, New York set to be big loser as sea levels rise. Now, changing gears briefly here, if I still have your attention. A lot of concern, a lot of talk about government shutdown stuff. Now, here's the thing. So they say that they cut the budget by about $38.5 billion. Bring up that headline, Bill. It's just been revealed that the debt jumped 54 $38.1 billion in the 8 days preceding the Bonner-Obama deal to cut $38.5 billion for the rest of the year. Now, the debt was $14.2101 trillion on March 30th, 2011. Those are official figures, my friends. It's far larger than that. And that's according to the Bureau of the Public Debt. On April 17th,